A fund manager I know calls Harvard University a hedge fund with a school attached to it. Today's Big Take story finds Harvard enjoys almost $500 million in tax benefits. So maybe Harvard is more like a hedge fund that pays no taxes. But should it? In this week's Muni Moment, we discuss all of this with Nic Querolo, who co-wrote the story. Nic, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So Harvard is super wealthy. It's got this $53 billion endowment, and as a nonprofit, it is exempt from paying most taxes and can sell tax-exempt bonds. But the school does make some voluntary payments to its municipalities. How does that work?
Sure. So Harvard is not unique. This is pretty common among private nonprofit colleges. But a lot of the Ivy League schools make what's called a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, which is kind of a goodwill payment that these schools make to their hometown. Usually it's like a sliver of what they would ordinarily pay in real estate taxes, and this is supposed to help cover some of the municipal costs like policing and upkeeping their grounds, that kind of thing. Right now there's a big push among local officials in Cambridge and Boston to try to get Harvard to pay more. But it's pretty delicate because these payments are totally voluntary.
Give us a sense here, though. I mean, this is pretty common, as you pointed out. Even the school I went to, they had similar fights way back in, the 40s when I went to college. Is there a sense, though, that the economic benefit that these schools will say that we give to this community, that might be enough, or at least enough to offset the difference in what they would have been paying in taxes?
That's certainly the argument that the schools make, is that it's almost immeasurable, the economic benefits that a school like Harvard brings to its backyard. I mean, and the world, for that matter. They're creating life-saving research. They're doing all types of really innovative work. And on top of that, I think they're one of the biggest employers in the region, one of the probably fourth or fifth biggest in the state of Massachusetts. So I think the schools would say that there's plenty of reason that they're not paying these taxes, and that's the way the law is written. But I think when we're facing this big commercial real estate crisis, some of these towns are facing some real budget squeezes. Harvard, MIT, these rich schools are a really attractive target.
Yeah, and in places like Boston, they're contending with people not coming into the office, for instance, so they're really thinking ahead in terms of how do we make up for some of this revenue. Is there a push to turn these voluntary payments into something more mandatory?
It's really difficult. There has been some legislation that's been proposed multiple times. Right now, some legislation has made it somewhat far in the state legislature that would try to compel Harvard and other schools to pay 25% of what they would otherwise pay in real estate taxes, but it's still to be seen whether it will pass.
Is there any sort of solution to this, though? Because anytime this debate comes up, two things come up. First is that Harvard ain't going anywhere. It's not like they're just going to pack their bags and move to Connecticut or somewhere.
They're not like the Oakland A's.
I mean, they're there. They're not. They're pretty much stuck one way or the other. And then the flip side of that, it gets back to this idea too for these communities. I mean, is there a way to negotiate with these universities so you get some of the issues addressed, like with housing and other things that maybe they feel like they don't have enough money for?
I think a lot of the negotiation happens in the public sphere. I mean, this is really an image question for schools like Harvard. Do people who live here feel like these schools are contributing fairly in exchange for the benefits that they get? You're right, they probably could not move, but Boston and Cambridge would probably not be the same places without these schools either. Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like, you walk around there. I mean, it's kind of synonymous, really, with Boston and Cambridge.
They own so much of the land and so many of the buildings in Boston and Cambridge. I mean, lawmakers at the local level are doing what they can. What about at the federal level to maybe strip schools of their nonprofit status, make it so that they're not exempt from taxes?
This would be extremely complicated. To pull a tax-exempt status away from a school like Harvard would involve changing the tax status on bonds, potentially changing the tax status on bonds that have already been issued. It would be a nightmare and very complicated, but some conservative lawmakers at the federal level have threatened it. I don't believe we've seen any legislation really proposed on that, but I think we talked about the endowment tax as if it were a total long shot, and lo and behold, it passed. So you never really know.